Good afternoon, Year 6, and welcome to your second literacy lesson of the week. Now, before I begin, I would first of all like to say a really big well done to all of the children who engaged so thoroughly with our work on Frances yesterday. I could tell that you really enjoyed the story. Some of you said you were a little bit frightened by it, me too, and you were able to form really accurate impressions of the character. Most importantly, you supported your impressions by choosing appropriate evidence from the text. Fantastic job, everybody. Now, for today's lesson, you will need a pen or a pencil to write with and a piece of paper. Please pause the video now to ensure that you're ready. Great. Now I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can access today's learning too. On the screen in front of you, you will see today's Grammar Do Now. Pause the video and have a go at that now. Fantastic. Now we're going to have a look at the answers together. You can see that I've already completed the first one for you. We were asked to choose a conjunction to join these two sentences together. Chen played football for 2 hours. He was out of breath. I've chosen the word so because the second sentence happens because of the first sentence, and we use so when something happens as a direct result of something else. Number 2, use the word trip as a noun and a verb. There were many examples you could have for this one. You could have had for this one, and I won't be able to read out every possibility, but here are 2 examples. Trip as a noun could be used like this. Unfortunately, we haven't been on a school trip this year due to the current COVID conditions. And trip as a verb could be used like this. Sometimes when I'm walking, I trip. Number 3, what is the underlined part of the sentence? Is it the subject, the verb, or the object? Lewis shouted at his mother. I can see that Lewis is underlined, and I know that Lewis is the person who is performing the verb. He is the person who is shouting. Therefore, Lewis is the subject of the sentence. Shouted is the verb because that is what he is doing, and the object is the mother. Number 4, which of these is an adverbial? Frantically is an adverbial because frantically often describes a verb. In the case of Frances, Frances rode frantically. Frantically described how she rode, so therefore that is the adverbial. And finally, circle all of the nouns in this sentence. Well, there were 4 nouns to spot here, and one of them is a proper noun. That's Carol, that's a name of a person. Her cat is also a noun, it is a thing, as is tree, as is garden. So well done if you managed to get all of those correct. Great job. Now we're going to move on to our learning today. Our WALT today is to establish an informal tone from the beginning of a diary entry. So if you have your pen and paper in front of you now, please write today's date and WALT as follows. So pause the video and write the date and WALT. Great. Now, yesterday we heard the story of Frances from a third person perspective, and now we are going to begin to write her diary entry, which I know lots of you are looking forward to doing. Some of you might have even written diary entries of your own in the past, so you may be very familiar with this style. And we're really going to be focusing on achieving an informal tone right from the outset. But before we begin, let's recap the features of a diary. A diary is written in the first person. That means we use the word I throughout. A diary is always written informally, in a conversational style, almost as if you're talking to your friend. Direct address is often another feature used in a diary. So, for example, you might say, "You'll never guess what happened to me today, diary." Or, it's been another bad day, diary. Or, what do you think about that, diary? Making sure you include the name of the diary. That's an example of direct address. Diaries are written in the past tense because you're reflecting on your thoughts and your feelings, and perhaps you're talking about what has just happened. So usually the past tense. Sometimes you might include a tiny little bit of future tense if you want to talk about what you're looking forward to, for example. However, mostly in the past tense. And in a diary entry, we adopt an emotive tone. That means we use language that tells the diary how we're thinking and how we're feeling. Often when people go to their diaries, it's because they're angry or sad or really excited about something that's just happened. So we need to make sure our language choices make that clear. Now, I've got two passages on the board. I'm going to read them both. But I want you to think, but actually only one of them is suitable for a diary. So whilst I'm reading, have a think. Passage 1. Dear diary, right now I don't feel like I can hold this pen. My fingers are aching so much. Well, I've started now, so I may as well carry on, right? I've never really liked writing a diary, but my parents always told me it would be fun to look back on when I'm older. Well, here I am, gazing upon the stars, wondering how on earth I have found myself here. Passage number 2. Dear diary, we've been in the trenches for weeks now. With each sunset, the enemy creeps closer, and by dawn we fought them back into their original corner. A deadly tug of war ownership of land, both of us ultimately trapped in the stalemate of war. I find myself huddling underneath a makeshift cabin, contemplating my actions, which resulted in my initial recruitment. So, you can see from the first example, whilst it's not written in the past tense, this person is actually writing in the present at the start of her diary. It uses lots of informal language and some rhetorical questions. However, in the second example, the language is much more complex and it's written really quite formally. Have a think, which passage is more suitable for a diary entry? You're right, the first passage. And the second passage is actually probably not suitable at all for a diary. You would probably find that in a letter if you're writing home to somebody to tell them about your experiences. Great, looks like we're ready to move on. Okay, now before we begin Frances's diary entry, when she was out in the water, we're going to recap the beginning of the video. So, we're not going to watch all of it because she wouldn't write lots of things have happened to her. And today we're only going to focus on how she began her diary entry or how she would have began. Okay, so as you watch the video, think about what has happened, Frances, that she might have told her diary so far, and what might she be thinking or feeling. Okay, we're just going to stop there. Nothing has been heard or seen by Frances as of yet. At the moment, she is feeling really peaceful, and that's key for you to remember for your writing today. Okay, so the purpose of our paragraph today, my turn, purpose. The purpose of our paragraph today is to set out exactly how Frances feels, and so that the reader gains an understanding of where she is and why she's ended up there. It must be really clear. Frances's thoughts and feelings must be really clear throughout, because that is key to a successful diary entry. So I'm going to share my screen with you now, and I'm going to model an answer for you that you may want to magpie ideas from. Now you can see we have 3 steps to success to help us, and I'm going to use these to help me structure my diary entry. But it's really important to add that you don't need to follow these steps to success as long as you feel like you have achieved the purpose of today's paragraph, which is to outline where Frances is and how she is feeling. Okay, so I've written my date and words, and now I'm ready to begin. So step number 1, what I really want to do first of all is to outline how Frances feels. How Frances feels. Outline how she feels, not when she's in the boat. I'm actually going to begin my diary entry from when Frances arrived at the nature reserve with her parents, because I think that's key to understanding why she decided to go out and row in the lake alone. And I want to make that clear to diary. So I'm going to start by saying, hey diary. Diary needs a capital letter because that's the neat. We're addressing diary as if they're called diary. So as if they are a person almost. Okay, I'm going to start off really informally by saying, hey diary, it's me again. It's me again. Hey diary, it's me again. Dash, long time no see. And that implies that Frances has written in the diary before. Now, that sounds like quite a positive opening, and now I'm going to start to talk about how exhausted and how frustrated she felt at the beginning of the holiday. So I'm going to say, I don't know how I've managed to put pen to paper. I don't know how I've managed to put pen to paper. Semicolon, because I want to add in a clause there that explains to the diary why she didn't think she'd be able to start writing a diary. So I'm going to say, I don't know how I've managed to put pen to paper. I've been rowing. I've been rowing over the lake's deepest spot. Over the lake's deepest spots. And as you can imagine, I'm exhausted. So immediately I've told the diary how I'm feeling. I've achieved that, how she feels. She's exhausted. Nice informal introduction as well. So I'm just going to read that first step and check it makes sense. Hey diary, it's me again. Long time no see. Now I know that my word today was to establish an informal tone, so I'm going to pick this long time no see because that is an example of an informal tone, and so is it's me again. So if you feel like you've achieved that informal tone, please do underline that so that your teachers can see that really clearly. Now I've went on to talk about how she feels. I don't know how I've managed to put pen to paper. Semicolon, a correct use of the semicolon because both clauses link. I've been rowing over the lake's deepest spots, and as you can imagine, I'm exhausted. Informal tone, an exclamation mark is appropriate there. Not lots and lots of exclamation marks, but one or two is definitely effective. Okay, step number 2. How did she end up there? And you can see in that first paragraph, there's a bit of a mix of tenses. It's the present tense here, and then the past tense in the middle. I've been rowing, I've managed, and then present again. So it's really important to try and manage your shifts and tenses. When you write your feeling, it's usually how you're feeling at the moment when you're writing the diary. So normally the present tense there. But that's going to be really key to the success of your diary entry today. Okay, I'm moving on to how she ended up in the middle of the lake, still trying to achieve that informal tone. So I'm going to start off with, you see diary, nice direct address. You see diary? I wouldn't usually row out alone. I wouldn't usually row out alone. Row out alone, although I'm not actually sure I believe Frances because I do think she's a little bit of a rebellious character. I wouldn't usually row out alone. I'm going to actually use another semicolon here because I want to link my next clause to my first clause to explain why she normally wouldn't go out on the boat, but this time she did. You see, diary, I wouldn't usually row out alone. I was just so desperate. I was just so desperate to get away from. Remember, I'm keeping it really informal and really chatty, so language like get away from is suitable. To get away from my annoying parents. Again, this is suitable style. She's a teenage girl. She's a little bit rebellious. She's chatting to her diary like it's her friend. So language like my annoying parents does help to keep that really informal. I was just so desperate to get away from my annoying parents. And right now, I'm going to actually add in a little bit of parentheses using brackets. Parentheses also adds to an informal tone. So in brackets, I'm going to explain why I couldn't wait to get away from my annoying parents. In brackets, I'm just going to write, they seem to have the most bizarre arguments. They seem to have the most bizarre, that means strange, arguments, exclamation mark. Fantastic. So I'm going to read back so far to check that my writing flows. Hey diary, it's me again. Long time no see. I don't know how I've managed to put pen to paper. I've been rowing over the lake's deepest spots, and as you can imagine, I'm exhausted. You see, diary, I wouldn't usually row out alone. Semicolon to link the clause. I was just so desperate to get away from my annoying parents. Parentheses, they seem to have the most bizarre arguments. And finally, so we've introduced how we feel, we've told diary where we are and how we've ended up there, and I'm going to end this entry by stating how she's feeling in her current situation. So if you remember the end point, if you remember where we watched up to the fact, or to the part where she drew a happy face on her knee. So she's clearly quite content. So I'm now going to tell diary what I'm doing, and I'm going to end on a rather positive note. Okay, but I'm still going to try and remember to be as informal as possible. So she's gotten away from her parents, and now I'm going to, final step is describe the setting. I wanted to actually add one final thing into this last paragraph. I was just so desperate to get away from my annoying parents. They seem to have the most bizarre arguments. I'm going to add, I'm glad it's just me and you now. I'm glad it's just me and you now. Really effective example of directly addressing the diary, you now. Okay, now we're going to tell diary where we are before we end our piece. So we told them earlier that we were annoyed by mum and dad, and now we're going to explain what we're doing now. Again, we're going to begin really informally. So I'm going to say, so here I am. Sat beneath. Not sat between, you can't sit between the sky. I'm going to say sat beneath the velvet black sky. The velvet black sky, that's a little bit more formal there. So I'm going to try and really make sure that I don't, use too much of that complex language. So here I am, sat beneath the velvet black sky, comma, I'm going to add in an in clause there, listening to the ripple of the waves in the lake. Listening to the ripple of the waves in the lake. That's an accurate description of where she is. Okay, and you may try and challenge yourself by using some figurative language and nice descriptive language there if you can. Okay. And let's see, how will I end my entry? I remember that when we finished the video, she was drawing a smiley face on her knee. So I want to convey how content she is right now. I'm not going to say I am very content because that is probably a little bit too formal. So I might end by saying, in fact, let me read back first to see what would flow on. So here I am, sat beneath the velvet black sky, listening to the ripple of the waves in the lake. Bliss, right? An example of a rhetorical question. Bliss means really calm. I wouldn't say something like, wouldn't you agree this is really calm? Or bliss, right? That's an example of a really informal question you might say as if you might use if you're talking to your friend. You might also say something like, peace at last. Or you might say something like this, life doesn't get much better than this. Or you could end with something a little bit more humorous, but actually taken from the story. All I need is a cigar. All I need is another cigar, and I'm in heaven. And I'm in heaven. That's a nice informal way, I'm in heaven, of saying, and I'm really, really happy. Not literally, she is in heaven. Okay, and that will bring our diary entry to the end. So let's read back the paragraph before I set you off on your own entry. Okay, so let's remind ourselves we were learning to establish a really informal tone from the beginning of the diary entry. And we really wanted to achieve our purpose, which was to explain, convey, that means to show how Frances was feeling throughout and why exactly she's ended up in this position. Hey diary, it's me again. Long time no see. I don't know how I've managed to put pen to paper. I've been rowing over the lake's deepest spots, and as you can imagine, I'm exhausted. You see, diary, I wouldn't usually row out alone. I was just so desperate to get away from my annoying parents. They seem to have the most bizarre arguments. I'm glad it's just me and you now. Peace at last. So here I am, sat beneath the velvet black sky, listening to the ripple of the waves in the lake. Bliss right. Sorry, I read that wrong. It should be bliss right. Some intonation at the end, as if you're asking the question. Or you might say something like, life doesn't seem to get much better. And in pink, I've highlighted examples of informal tone being conveyed. And you'll see that throughout in a diary entry, contractions are also used. Okay, that's when you join two words together and omit a letter. So I've is short for I have. There's another example. That chatty style requires you to use contractions. So do make sure you remember your apostrophes throughout. Sheffield, I am really, really excited to see, in fact, not just Sheffield, this love forgot herself. Sheffield, Kent and Oxford. I'm teaching to the whole of Year 6. How lucky I am. Year 6, sorry, I am so excited to see these diary entries. You know, I love writing and I particularly love to read diary entries when you can convey your thoughts and your feelings. Now remember, the most effective diary entries are going to make me believe like you are Frances. Informal style, she's a little bit cheeky, a little bit chatty, or not a little bit chatty, a little bit cheeky, mischievous, rebellious, and I really hope to see that coming across in your writing. Okay, there's a reminder of your steps to success, and remember, you don't need to use these if you don't want to. Okay. Cannot wait to see your writing. Make sure it goes up on Seesaw so that your teachers can see it too. And in the afternoon briefings, we will read out some of the most successful pieces. Well done, everybody, and have a great day.